Hello there, and welcome back. Before anything else, take a moment to notice where you are right now. Maybe you are lying in bed, the lights dim, the weight of the day finally beginning to slip away. Or perhaps you are listening in the quiet hum of a long commute, eyes fixed on the road, while your mind wanders into places far beyond the horizon. Wherever you are, tonight I want to take you somewhere very far away, far beyond the familiar pull of Earth, into the silent cold where Mars glows like an ember in the dark. Something happened out there, something that scientists have described in hushed tones, as if even speaking about it too loudly might bring it closer. A project known as 3I divided by Atlas did something near Mars, something that has been called terrifying, unsettling, and even catastrophic. The word terrifying is not one that scientists use lightly. It is usually reserved for novels or news headlines meant to provoke. But this time, it was whispered in labs, in control rooms, on late-night phone calls between agencies. And that makes us ask, what exactly took place near the red planet? Imagine looking up at Mars tonight. To the naked eye, it is nothing more than a small red dot glowing faintly against the velvet black. But to those who follow the movements of 3I divided by Atlas, that red glow has become something heavier. It carries the weight of a question. Did we just unlock something we do not understand? Or worse, did we awaken something we cannot control? The project itself was ambitious. 3I divided by Atlas was designed to be a leap forward in how humanity observes the cosmos. A massive array of instruments, positioned with precision near the orbit of Mars, able to probe deep into planetary crusts, atmospheres, and magnetic fields. Its purpose, at least on paper, was noble: science, discovery, the pursuit of knowledge. But history has taught us again and again that noble beginnings can sometimes stumble into unintended consequences. Just as splitting the atom led not only to energy but to destruction, so too might a scientific project in space unlock shadows that we never meant to touch. For now, we do not need to rush into the details of what 3I divided by Atlas did. Tonight is not about a quick report, a flash of news, or a scientific press release. This is about slowing down, letting the story breathe, and exploring the emotions, the fears, and the wonder behind the event. Because sometimes, the most important part of a mystery is not the answer, it is the way the question reshapes how we see ourselves. Close your eyes for a moment, if you can. Picture Mars not as a red speck, but as a looming world. Vast deserts stretch across its surface, ancient riverbeds cut into stone, and volcanoes higher than anything Earth has ever known rise into thin skies. For centuries, humans have gazed at it and projected stories, canals, civilizations, gods of war, futures where our species spreads beyond Earth. Mars has always been a mirror for our imagination. So what happens when, instead of dreams, it reflects fear? The event near Mars was described as terrifying not only because of what happened, but because of what it might mean. Technology that was supposed to measure became something that might have disturbed. A device that was meant to observe may have interfered. Did 3I divided by Atlas trigger a burst of energy? Did it stumble across signals we were not ready to hear? Or was it simply human error magnified across millions of kilometers? In the silence of space, mistakes echo louder. There is no gentle buffer, no forgiving margin. Every action is written into the dark like fire on black cloth, and the scientists who watched the instruments flicker and fail knew at once that something larger was unfolding. They described their screens lighting up in ways they could not explain, data streams spiking, then collapsing. Some compared it to watching a heartbeat suddenly stop and restart, except the heartbeat they were watching belonged to Mars itself. The fear was not just technical, it was emotional, cultural, almost mythological. We named the planet Mars after the god of war. We painted it red in our minds, long before we ever saw its surface. And now, when a machine meant to study it does something unexpected, we reach instinctively for old archetypes. Did we anger Mars? Did we step where we should not tread? Rational or not, Such thoughts cling to us because they remind us that exploration is never neutral. To look outward is always to risk awakening something inward. For you listening right now, perhaps with eyes half closed, let yourself linger on that feeling. A small world, just next door in cosmic terms, suddenly the stage for an event no one can fully explain. Fear is part of it, yes, but so is awe. The awe of knowing that the universe is bigger, stranger, and less predictable than our instruments or our egos would like. The awe of realizing that our reach has extended far enough to touch things we do not fully understand. And maybe, just maybe, that is the point of nights like this. To feel small again, to remember that, for all our data and satellites and calculations, we are still fragile dreamers, looking out at the dark, waiting to learn what waits beyond. As the story unfolds, we will step carefully through the layers. What 3I divided by Atlas was meant to do, what it might have unleashed, and why so many people felt a chill when the reports began to circulate. But for now, let this thought settle with you. Mars is not silent tonight. Something stirred there, something powerful enough to make the most rational voices in science tremble with unease. And we are left here, listening, wondering, afraid, yet unable to look away. So breathe slowly. The night is long, and we are only at the beginning of the journey. The heart of every mystery is a question, and tonight the question hovers like a faint red star in the sky. What exactly did 3I divided by Atlas do near Mars? It sounds simple when you put it like that. Just a project, a machine, a technical event, but questions often carry more weight than answers. And this one carries enough weight to bend not only our science but our imagination. Because if what happened near Mars was merely a malfunction, then we can breathe. But if it was something else, something unplanned, something beyond human control, then we are standing at the edge of a story much larger than ourselves. Think about the way we usually talk about space. The language is full of triumph. We launched, we discovered, we landed. We frame it as progress, as conquest, as steps forward. But tonight, the language shifts. Scientists whisper words like terrifying, unsettling, unknown. That shift alone should make us pause. Why would people trained to measure calmly, to calculate without panic, reach for words that sound like folklore? What if the event near Mars was not a mistake at all, but the unveiling of something hidden? What if the red planet has been quiet for so long not because it is empty, but because it is waiting? Picture this, a vast desert world, silent for billions of years. Our instruments begin to hum. Signals probe the thin air. And suddenly something responds. Not a voice, not a clear message, but a ripple. A surge. Data streams crackling with patterns too deliberate to ignore and too strange to categorize. That is one possibility. Of course, there is another. The possibility that what we saw was not life, but death. Not communication, but collapse. That in the act of probing Mars, we triggered a release of energy, a breakdown of equilibrium, like opening a sealed chamber that was never meant to be disturbed. A chamber that groaned once, and then fell silent again, leaving us to wonder if we had just become the intruders of a cosmic tomb. And yet, perhaps the most terrifying possibility of all is also the simplest. We don't know. We may never know. Our instruments gather numbers. Our analysts interpret. Our stories circle around the unknown. But the heart of the event remains hidden, and the uncertainty itself gnaws at us. Uncertainty is a strange thing. In daily life, it can be frustrating, but in matters of existence, it can be paralyzing. When we don't know whether the event near Mars was harmless or catastrophic, our minds swing between extremes. Between comfort, it was just static, nothing more, and dread, it was a signal, a warning, an accident that cannot be undone. Let me ask you something gently. If you were told that tonight, out there in the darkness, humanity had done something irreversible, how would you feel? Would you panic? Would you ignore it, hoping that silence means safety? Or would you lean in, curious, knowing that the story of our species has always been about daring to ask questions that frighten us? Because that is where we are tonight, between fear and curiosity, between science and myth, between what we can explain and what we can only imagine. Mars has always been a symbol of conflict. In Roman mythology, Mars was the god of war, fierce and unrelenting. In our modern imagination, Mars has been a canvas for dreams of invasion, colonization, survival. Every culture that has looked up at that red star has seen something different. A threat, a hope, a mirror. And now, with 3I divided by Atlas, we may have added another layer to that long tradition. A moment when the planet of war reflected our own internal struggle, our hunger for discovery colliding with our fear of the unknown. So what is the question we must ask? It is not simply, what happened near Mars? It is deeper. It is this. What if our reach has exceeded our wisdom? What if the event near Mars is the first sign that the universe does not yield its secrets gently? History is full of such questions. When Prometheus stole fire, he asked them. When Oppenheimer watched the first nuclear flash, he asked them. When explorers set sail across oceans they did not understand, they asked them. And now, standing at the edge of Mars, staring into a mystery lit in red dust and trembling data, we are asking again. The answer will not come quickly. And maybe that is a gift. Because in the pause, in the silence before clarity arrives, we are forced to see ourselves honestly, curious, reckless, fragile, determined. A species forever balancing on the knife's edge between wonder and fear. So tonight, let the question linger with you. What if what 3I divided by Atlas did near Mars is not just science, but a message? A message about how small we are, how little we know, and how much there is still left to fear. And as you drift deeper into this thought, remember sometimes the question itself is the answer. Before we go further, I want to pause for something more personal. We've been speaking about Mars, about data, about the strange pulse of fear that scientists felt when 3I divided by Atlas did the unthinkable. But let's step back for a moment, because every story, no matter how vast, always circles back to you, the listener. Where are you right now? Are you curled up in bed, letting your eyelids grow heavier as each sentence drifts past like a soft tide? Are you lying awake, restless, hoping that a story like this will calm your thoughts even as it unsettles you? Or perhaps you're listening while traveling, your body moving through the world while your mind slips away into the silence between planets. Wherever you are, the important thing is this. In this moment, you and I are sharing the same story. A thread stretched between us, fragile and invisible, but real. Think about that. The same way a signal from 3I divided by Atlas travels across millions of kilometers of space to reach a satellite. These words are traveling across invisible networks to reach you. And in both cases, there is mystery. In both cases, there is the question. What if the signal carries more than we expect? Take a slow breath. Let it fill your lungs. Imagine the air you breathe as borrowed from Earth itself, oxygen made by trees, recycled through oceans, drifting for centuries before finding its way to you tonight. Now imagine that somewhere above, instruments are listening to the air of Mars. Thin, cold, almost empty, but not silent. What do they hear? What did 3I divided by Atlas hear? It's easy to feel distant from such things. Mars feels far away, almost unreal. But the truth is, space is never as distant as it seems. Our lives are already woven into it. Satellites orbit overhead, guiding your maps, connecting your calls, streaming your music. The International Space Station circles like a silent lantern. The moon's pull shapes the tides you hear crashing on beaches. And now, near Mars, 3I divided by Atlas has left a scar, or perhaps an echo that may ripple all the way back here. To you, to me. So let me ask you gently, if tonight you could send a message into that darkness, what would it be? Would you ask for safety? Would you demand answers? Would you whisper a prayer, or a joke, or a memory? The truth is, every time we explore space, we are also exploring ourselves. Every signal we send outward is also a mirror turned inward. Perhaps that is why people have been reacting so strongly, not just because something terrifying happened near Mars, but because it reminds us how fragile we are, that even with rockets and machines and data, we are still children staring at the night sky, uncertain of what stares back. And yet, within that fragility is something beautiful: curiosity, wonder, the ability to ask questions no other species on Earth can ask. To look at a star and think, what if? To hear a signal and wonder, who else might be listening? That is what makes us human, even when the answers frighten us. If this kind of journey, the slow unraveling of science and story, of fact and fear, brings you comfort, I invite you to linger with us. Give this moment a quiet gesture of connection. A like, a subscribe, a comment that tells me where in the world you are listening from. Not because algorithms matter more than awe, but because these tiny gestures are like lights in the dark. They remind me, and others, that we are not alone in this curiosity. Imagine hundreds, even thousands of people, all lying in their beds or sitting on late-night trains, listening to the same words at the same time. A community of dreamers scattered across the globe, united by a single question about Mars. That thought alone is powerful. It means that even in fear, we find connection. Even in uncertainty, we build bridges. So as the story of three, I, divided by Atlas, unfolds, hold on to that thread. You are not just an observer. You are part of the experiment, part of the reflection, part of the species that dares to look into the dark and ask, what happened? Let yourself feel it. The intimacy of this shared moment. The vastness of the cosmos pressing against the smallness of your room. The way fear can sharpen wonder. The way wonder can soften fear. And when the scientists whispered, terrifying, perhaps what they meant was not only the event itself, but the realization that billions of us would soon be asking together. Billions of fragile voices woven into one question that reaches across the void. What did we just unleash near Mars? Tonight, as you listen, remember you are part of that question. And the fact that you are listening, breathing, imagining, means you are part of the answer too. To understand why the event near Mars matters so deeply, we need to widen the lens. Mars is not just a planet. It is a stage on which human ambition has been rehearsed for centuries. Long before rockets, long before telescopes powerful enough to pierce its thin skies, we looked up and saw a red light and imagined stories. And over time, those stories transformed into missions, blueprints, risks, and dreams. Think back to the very first time Mars was recorded in human history. Ancient Babylonians marked it as Nergal, a deity of fire and destruction. The Greeks called it Ares, fierce and bloody. The Romans renamed it Mars, their god of war, and from that moment the red planet carried the weight of battle in its very name. When Galileo first turned his telescope toward it in the 17th century, he saw not a god, but a disk, tangible, imperfect, real. From mythology to science, Mars has always been more than a dot in the sky. It has been a mirror of what we fear and what we seek. Fast forward to the modern age. The 20th century turned that distant fire into an object of obsession. In 1965, NASA's Mariner 4 sent back the first close-up images: barren landscapes, craters, silence. For many, it was a disappointment. They had hoped for canals, for civilizations, for evidence of life. Instead, they saw rock and dust. Yet even in that silence, the fascination only grew. Viking landers touched down in the 1,970 seconds. Rovers began to crawl across the surface. Satellites mapped every ridge and canyon. Each mission chipped away at the mystery, but none of them erased it. Why? Because Mars has always represented something larger than itself. For scientists, it is the closest laboratory for life beyond Earth. For engineers, it is the next challenge. the next frontier. For ordinary people, it is the dream of survival, another home when Earth falters. And for storytellers, Mars is a stage where our myths of conquest, failure, and hope play out. When 3I divided by Atlas was placed near Mars, it carried the weight of that entire history. Every whisper of mythology, every photograph, every rover wheel print, in the dust, all of it led to this. The world may not have noticed when the instruments were first switched on, but to the small circle of scientists and engineers who had labored for years, it was a culmination. They were about to listen to Mars in ways no one ever had. But history has a way of humbling ambition. We often believe that progress is a straight line, that each mission builds neatly on the last, that we are climbing a staircase into the stars. Yet the truth is messier. For every triumph, there is a silence. For every successful orbit, a lost probe. For every rover that survives the dust storms, another that lies silent in the sand. Mars has swallowed as many machines as it has welcomed. The event with 3I divided by Atlas was not the first time Mars reminded us that exploration is never guaranteed, but it may be the most chilling. Let's linger on that idea. Mars has both a goal and a gatekeeper. Think of the countless hours spent in control rooms, faces lit by screens, waiting for signals delayed by minutes across millions of kilometers. Imagine the breath held each time a rover lands, bouncing on airbags or lowering by crane, knowing that one wrong angle could shatter years of work. The tension is always there. The silence between signals is always heavy. And when silence stretches too long, fear enters the room. Now add to that tension the event of 3I divided by Atlas. Not silence, but something worse. A surge, a noise, a pattern that could not be explained. That is why this incident resonates. It was not the absence of data, it was data that screamed too loudly, patterns that did not belong. And when Mars gives us something we do not expect, we cannot help but return to the oldest habit of humankind, turning a planet into a story. For some, the story is hope. Maybe what 3I divided by Atlas detected was life, or the ghost of it, a whisper from ancient microbes buried in the dust. For others, the story is fear, a disturbance, a dangerous signal, a crack in the silence that should never have been broken. Both stories matter, because both remind us of why Mars is different from any other planet we study. It is not just close, it is familiar enough to imagine living there, alien enough to terrify us. And so, the cosmic stage is set. On one side, the long arc of human history, always pointing upward, always daring to reach further. On the other, a silent red world, indifferent, watching, sometimes yielding, sometimes punishing. The collision of these two forces, ambition and indifference, creates the drama that makes the event of 3I divided by Atlas feel like more than science. It feels like myth reborn. Tonight, as you let your thoughts drift, remember that this is not the first time Mars has tested us, but it may be the first time we tested Mars in return. And the result, described as terrifying, has become another chapter in the long story of our relationship with the red planet. The question now is not whether Mars is silent, but whether we are ready to listen to what that silence has to say. To understand why the 3I divided by Atlas event shook so many people, we need to look at the planet itself, not as a myth, not as a symbol, but as a body of stone, dust, and thin air. Mars, stripped of its stories, is still one of the strangest neighbors we have. Begin with its size. Mars is smaller than Earth, about half the diameter, with less than a tenth of our mass. Its gravity would make you feel lighter, freer, able to leap higher than you ever could at home. Yet that same lightness comes with a cost. Mars cannot hold on to a thick atmosphere. The air there is whisper thin, mostly carbon dioxide, too thin for lungs, too cold for comfort. At night, temperatures plummet to extremes that would freeze skin and bone in minutes. The ground itself tells a different story. Volcanoes tower higher than any mountain on Earth. Olympus Mons rises nearly 3 times the height of Everest. a giant frozen in silence. Valleys stretch longer than the distance across entire continents. Valles Marineris, a scar carved across the face of the planet, runs so deep and wide it could swallow the Grand Canyon many times over. Mars is not empty. It is dramatic, raw, and overwhelming. And then there is the mystery of water. Once, billions of years ago, rivers cut across its surface, lakes shimmered, oceans may have lapped against its shores. Today, only traces remain: dried riverbeds, minerals that could only form in water, and ice locked beneath polar caps. It is as if Mars carries the memory of a childhood it cannot return to, a reminder that worlds, like people, change with time. Scientists have studied these details for decades. Each mission, each rover, each orbit has added another piece to the puzzle, and yet the puzzle remains incomplete. Why did Mars lose its atmosphere? Why did its magnetic field collapse, leaving it exposed to radiation from the sun? And most haunting of all, if life ever began there, where did it go? That is why 3I divided by Atlas was so important. Positioned near Mars, it was meant to listen more carefully than any probe before it, to measure the planet's trembling, its magnetic whisper, its chemical size. It was supposed to give us answers about a world that feels both familiar and alien. Imagine this: a machine designed to hear what we cannot. Every tiny shift in the crust, every faint ripple of the atmosphere, every echo of solar wind brushing against rock. If Mars is a drum, 3I divided by Atlas was the ear pressed close to the surface, listening for a beat. And when the instruments spiked, when the data screamed, scientists were left with a chilling question: what did Mars just play? Some argue that the event was geological Mars shuddering, releasing energy deep underground. Others whisper that it might have been cosmic, something external colliding, disturbing, resonating. And a few dare to suggest something even stranger, that Mars responded, that the planet is not just a dead rock, but something more. Here, facts blur into philosophy, because when we strip Mars down to raw science, it still feels alive. Dust storms wrap the planet for months at a time, choking its surface in red haze. Polar caps expand and shrink with the seasons. Ice glitters in hidden places. The planet breathes, not like lungs, but in cycles of dust, ice, and carbon dioxide. In its silence, Mars still moves. And that is why the 3I divided by Atlas event rattles us. Because it happened not in a vacuum, but in the context of a world already full of mysteries. A world that looks just enough like Earth to haunt us, and just different enough to warn us. Picture yourself standing there, boots sinking into red dust, horizon stretching forever, air so thin that every breath is stolen by your suit. You are surrounded by silence, and yet every rock, every canyon, every storm tells you this world is not empty. It is waiting. That is why experiments on Mars matter, not because they prove we can build machines or land rockets, but because they remind us of the fragility of life. If Mars once had rivers, if it once had air, if it once had the conditions for life and lost them, then what does that mean for Earth? When we listen to Mars, we are not just listening to another planet. We are listening to a possible future. 3I divided by Atlas was built to ask that future a question. The terrifying part is not that Mars answered, but that we may not yet understand the language it spoke. So tonight, as we drift further into this story, hold on to this thought. Mars is not just a backdrop for fear. It is a teacher, a warning, a reflection. And whatever happened with 3I divided by Atlas was not an isolated glitch. It was part of the long conversation between humanity and the universe. A conversation that we cannot stop, even when the answers frighten us. When we look at Mars through the cold eyes of science, we see dust, rock, ice, and silence. But when we look at it through the older lens of myth, we see something very different. For as long as humans have watched the skies, Mars has been more than a planet. It has been a symbol, a god, a story etched into the stars. To the Babylonians, Mars was Nergal, the deity of fire and plague. They saw in its red glow the omen of war, of cities in flames, of armies marching across deserts. The Greeks renamed it Ares, fierce and blood-soaked, a god who thrived not in peace but in chaos. And when the Romans inherited the heavens, they gave him the name that has lasted to this day, Mars, the god of war. Think about that for a moment. Out of all the planets visible to the naked eye, Mars alone was stained red, its color reminiscent of blood spilled on soil. How could ancient people see that and not think of battlefields? How could they resist the temptation to see in its glow a reflection of human violence? Even now, millennia later, the name has not changed. We still call it Mars. We still associate it with conflict. Myth lingers, even when science advances. And perhaps that is why the 3I divided by Atlas event feels so unnerving. It is not only the data spike or the unexplained surge, it is the way those things echo our oldest fears. To disturb Mars is to disturb war itself, to awaken a god who was never meant to be touched. Rationally, we know machines cannot anger deities, but emotionally, the connection is harder to shake. When scientists whispered the word terrifying, they tapped into something older than reason. Consider how myths shape perception. When Galileo first looked at Mars, he did so with eyes already colored by centuries of warlike symbolism. When H.G. Wells wrote The War of the Worlds, he drew on Mars as the natural home of invaders, because the red planet already carried that shadow. And now, when a modern instrument like 3I divided by Atlas produces a result we cannot explain, our minds reach back to the same stories. Maybe Mars is warning us. Maybe Mars is not meant to be ours. Of course, myth does more than frighten, it also guides. The Romans worshipped Mars not only as a god of destruction, but as a god of agriculture, protector of fields, guardian of new growth. He was a paradox warrior and nurturer, destroyer and giver of life. Mars was not just a planet of endings, but of beginnings, and perhaps there is a lesson hidden in that paradox. Maybe the event with 3I divided by Atlas was not a threat, but a reminder that out of destruction can come knowledge, that even fear can lead to discovery. Let yourself imagine, just for a moment, standing in the ancient world. No telescopes, no satellites, no scientific data, only the night sky, vast and eternal. The stars are steady, unblinking, and among them, a single point of light burns red, moving slowly against the backdrop. How would you not tell stories about it? How would you not believe that such a restless star carried a restless spirit? Even today, we are not so different. We dress our machines in mythology without even realizing it. We call our rovers names like Perseverance and Curiosity, as if they are characters in an epic tale. We give spacecraft heroic acronyms. We design logos that resemble shields and spears. Mythology has not vanished, it has evolved, woven into the fabric of science. And so, when 3I divided by Atlas faltered, when it did something that filled experts with dread, it was only natural to reach for myth again, to whisper that maybe Mars, the god of war, had stirred. But myths are not just stories of the past, they are mirrors of the present. When we say Mars is the god of war, what we really mean is that war has always been with us, and Mars reflects it back. When we fear that 3I divided by Atlas has awakened something, what we really fear is that we have awakened ourselves, that in chasing knowledge, we have lit the spark of conflict once more, this time not between nations but between humanity and the cosmos itself. So, is Mars a god, a myth, a battlefield waiting for us to stumble into it? Or is it simply a planet, indifferent to our fears? The answer may not matter as much as the feeling, because the truth is, myths survive because they carry something real, our emotions, our instincts, our shadows, and those shadows are very much alive tonight. The red planet has always whispered to us in the language of fear and fascination, and with the event of 3I divided by Atlas, that whisper feels louder, more urgent. as if Mars itself has stepped once again into the role we wrote for it thousands of years ago. Not just a world, but a warning. So far, we've circled the mystery. We've spoken about Mars, about myth, about fear. But to understand why the 3I divided by Atlas event matters, we need to ask a simpler question. What exactly is 3I divided by Atlas? On paper, it sounds straightforward. The name itself, 3I divided by Atlas, stands for Interplanetary Integrated Instrument, Advanced Terrestrial and Lunar Array System, a complicated title for what is essentially a network of sensors designed to push human exploration further than ever before. Imagine a colossal ear pressed against the silence of space. That is what 3I divided by Atlas was built to be. It wasn't just one device, but many. Arrays of magnetometers, seismic detectors, radiation counters, and optical systems, all working together, orbiting near Mars. Their purpose? To listen, to record, to see what no human eye could. We wanted to hear the heartbeat of another world, to trace the ghostly echo of solar winds as they brushed against Martian dust, to watch the faint trembling of rocks as if the planet itself were breathing. The project took decades to design, billions of dollars, thousands of engineers, countless late nights in control rooms. Nations pooled resources, corporations provided technology, universities trained new minds. For a brief moment, the world came together for a single purpose: to look at Mars not through myth, but through data. And yet, even from the beginning, there were shadows. Some critics asked why. Why spend so much on listening to another world when our own still suffers? Why launch fragile machines into cold space when millions on Earth go hungry? The official answer was simple: knowledge. Every discovery about Mars teaches us about Earth, its history, its climate, its fragility. If Mars once had rivers, what does that say about the fate of our oceans? If Mars lost its atmosphere, what does that say about ours? But unofficially, there were whispers of something more. Some said 3I divided by Atlas was not only about science, but also about security. That behind the language of exploration lay another ambition: control, to map resources, to prepare for colonization, to ensure that if humanity ever spread beyond Earth, one nation or one corporation would not be left behind. And so, 3I divided by Atlas became a paradox. To some, it was a beacon of curiosity. To others, it was a chess piece in a quiet war. But to everyone, it was impressive. The most advanced listening post humanity had ever built, stationed near a planet that had haunted our imagination for millennia. Imagine the excitement when it was first switched on. Screens in control rooms glowing, engineers holding their breath. The first streams of data pouring in like whispers from the dark. Numbers, charts, signals, each one a glimpse into a world we had never touched directly. For months, the system worked beautifully. It measured magnetic fields, mapped underground structures, recorded the dance of solar particles. Scientists smiled. Reports celebrated. Politicians called it a success. And then came the night everything changed. That is why the event shook so deeply. Because 3I divided by Atlas wasn't an experiment in a basement. It was humanity's ear, pressed against Mars. It was our pride, our hope, our collective investment. And when it did something terrifying, it wasn't just data that faltered, it was our sense of control. Think of it like this. You spend years building a ship, every plank polished, every sail tested. You launch it into the ocean, confident. And then one night, without warning, the ship vanishes. No storm, no enemy, just silence. What would you feel? Confusion, grief, maybe even betrayal. That is what the scientists felt when their instruments surged with patterns they couldn't explain, a sense that something had answered back. Here's the irony. Atlas was named after the Titan of Greek mythology, the one who carried the heavens on his shoulders. It was meant to hold up knowledge, to bear the weight of discovery. But like its namesake, it may also be cursed to carry not just answers, but burdens too heavy for us. And this is where science meets society. The event near Mars was not confined to labs and reports. Word leaked. Rumors spread. Some said Atlas had triggered a Martian quake visible from orbit. Others claimed it had intercepted signals that looked like language. Still others whispered about radiation bursts that could not be explained. The truth is still hidden, but the fear spread faster than facts. When people hear that billions were spent, that nations united, that the most advanced instrument ever built produced terror instead of triumph, their imagination fills the gaps. Some see conspiracy, others see catastrophe. All see the same thing, that humanity has touched something it may not be ready for. And that, perhaps, is the real lesson of 3I divided by Atlas. That our greatest achievements often carry our greatest risks. That the line between discovery and disaster is thin, fragile, and easy to cross. As we continue deeper into this story, remember this. 3I divided by Atlas was meant to listen, but sometimes listening is the most dangerous act of all, because when you press your ear to the silence of the universe, you cannot control what you will hear. There is a question that lingers whenever we speak of projects like 3I divided by Atlas. Why do we do this at all? Why reach for other worlds? Spend fortunes? Risk failure? Just to measure dust and silence? The official answers are familiar science, curiosity, progress. But beneath them lies something older, something deeper, and perhaps something more dangerous. Our ambition. Human beings have always carried the hunger to go further, to step beyond the edge of the village, the ocean, the atmosphere. Every time we cross a boundary, we call it progress. But history shows us another truth. Progress often wears two faces. The same fire that warmed the first humans also burned their shelters. The same atom that lights our cities also built bombs. Ambition gives us wings, but it also gives us arrogance. 3I divided by Atlas, in many ways, is a mirror of that arrogance. To say we will listen to the heartbeat of another planet, to claim that we can press our machines against the silence of Mars and bend it into data, this is bold, extraordinary, even beautiful, but it also carries the shadow of hubris. For what if Mars does not want to be listened to? What if the universe itself does not yield its secrets without cost? Consider the story of Icarus from Greek myth. He built wings of wax and feathers, rose into the sky, and for a moment touched freedom. But he flew too close to the sun, and the wax melted, and he fell. We retell that story, not to mock his courage, but to remind ourselves of the price of ignoring limits. In the glow of 3I divided by Atlas, in the terrifying spike of its instruments, some hear the echo of Icarus's fall. And yet, without ambition, would we still be here? Without the arrogance to believe we could sail across oceans, would new continents have been mapped? Without the arrogance to split the atom, would we have unlocked nuclear medicine? The truth is uncomfortable. Ambition is both the source of our light and the spark of our darkest shadows. When scientists called the Atlas event terrifying, they were not only speaking of data, they were speaking of this realization that every time we reach outward, we risk falling, that every discovery carries within it the seed of disaster. And yet, we keep reaching. Take a moment to reflect on your own life. Have you ever chased something you weren't sure you were ready for? A dream, a relationship, a decision? The fear, the excitement, the sense of stepping into the unknown, it is the same feeling scaled across billions of dollars and millions of kilometers. Humanity is not so different from the individual. We want, we reach, we stumble, we learn. But in space, the stumbles echo louder. The silence around Mars is unforgiving. There are no second chances, no soft landings when ambition falters. And that may be why the 3I divided by Atlas event feels like more than a glitch. It feels like a warning. A reminder that ambition, unchecked, can turn into arrogance, that our desire to know might outpace our ability to understand. Still, the paradox remains. To stop reaching is to stop being human. To limit curiosity is to deny the very spark that carried us from caves to cities, from darkness to light. The question is not whether we should explore, but how we should explore, with humility or with hubris, with patience or with pride. Some philosophers say the universe is like a great library. Each planet, each star, a book waiting to be read. But a library has rules. Whisper, not shout. Turn the pages gently. Do not tear them apart in haste. If 3I divided by Atlas represents humanity opening one of those books, perhaps the terrifying part is that we didn't whisper, we demanded answers. And the universe may have answered back in ways we weren't ready to hear. Ambition is not evil. Arrogance is not inevitable. But the line between them is thin, and Mars has always been the place where we test it. Every mission to the Red Planet is a question asked of ourselves. Are we explorers or conquerors? Are we learners or intruders? The 3I divided by Atlas event forces us to ask again, and the answer, whatever it may be, will shape the story of humanity's future among the stars. So tonight, as you let this story sink in, hold on to this thought. Our ambition is the fire that guides us, but fire always burns. And the glow on Mars is not just the color of dust, it is the reflection of our own restless desire to know, to reach, to claim, a desire that may yet lift us higher than ever before, or burn our wings as it always has. Close your eyes for a moment. Picture the night sky, quiet and endless. Among the stars, one point glows, differently red, steady, unblinking. That is Mars. To most, it is just another speck of light. But tonight, knowing what we know, its glow feels heavier, as if the planet itself has secrets burning inside it, secrets we have only just disturbed. Now imagine you are standing outside, somewhere far from the city, where the air is clear and the darkness is whole. You tilt your head upward and find that crimson spark. For thousands of years, people have done exactly the same thing, seeing in that light omens of war, tales of gods, or promises of discovery. But for you, here and now, Mars is no longer just a story. It is a place where something terrifying has happened. That unease is hard to shake. It seeps in slowly, not like panic, but like a shadow stretching across the ground. The event of 3I divided by Atlas lingers in the mind not because of the numbers or the graphs, but because of the feeling it carries that we may have awakened something better left untouched. Picture Mars not as a dot, but as a world. Rust-red deserts stretching endlessly, mountains piercing thin skies, canyons so deep that sunlight barely touches their floors. A planet where silence reigns, where no bird calls, no wind whispers in familiar tones. And now, imagine that silence broken not by a voice, not by a storm, but by a pulse, a sudden surge that ripples through the dust and the rock, reaching out to machines that should never have heard it. That is the unease. That is the chill. Some describe it as a fear of the unknown, but it is deeper than that. It is the fear that the unknown has noticed us back, that in listening to Mars, we have been heard. And once heard, we cannot be forgotten. Think about how fragile we are. Earth, vibrant and alive, floats only a few minutes of light away from this quiet neighbor. A single planet, barely protected by a thin atmosphere, spinning in the void. And yet, we send our machines outward as if we are invincible, as if the universe will bow to our questions. When Atlas trembled, it was as if Mars whispered back, "You are not invincible." The unease is not just scientific, it is emotional. It is the same unease a child feels when stepping into a dark room where the shadows seem too still, too deliberate. It is the same unease sailors once felt when their compasses spun wildly at sea, when familiar stars vanished behind clouds. It is the sense that the ground beneath your certainty has shifted and the rules you trusted no longer apply. And yet, this unease carries fascination, because fear and wonder are twins, born of the same spark. To look at Mars glowing red in the night is to feel both dread and awe, dread at what might lurk beyond, awe at the fact that we can even ask. That tension is why people cannot stop talking about 3I divided by Atlas. Why whispers spread faster than facts. Why the glow of Mars feels different tonight. Imagine again that you are outside. The air is cool, the world around you hushed. Above, Mars burns faintly, and in your chest, you feel it. A quiet pull, a curiosity that overrides the unease. You want to know, you need to know. That is the human condition, to tremble and to reach at the same time. The scientists who saw the event unfold were no different. Some sat frozen, staring at screens filled with impossible data. Some whispered questions they dared not answer. Some felt a thrill, a rush of discovery, even as dread wrapped itself around their thoughts. Because deep down, every one of them knew this was history. This was the moment Mars stopped being silent. And so, the unease remains. It lingers in headlines, in conversations, in your thoughts as you drift towards sleep. The planet that once inspired gods and myths has stirred again, not in legend but in reality. And whether it is danger, discovery, or something in between, we cannot look away. As you lie here listening, let that unease wash over you gently. Do not fight it. Let it remind you that the universe is still larger than our certainties, that mystery is still alive, that fear and wonder are inseparable companions. And above all, remember, the glow of Mars tonight is not just the reflection of sunlight on dust. It is the reflection of our own fragile courage, burning red against the endless dark. Whenever something mysterious happens, humanity quickly divides into camps. The event of 3I divided by Atlas near Mars was no exception. Almost as soon as the first whispers leaked from control rooms, two stories began to spread, one grounded in calm explanation, the other steeped in fear. The first story was simple. It was a glitch. Machines fail, sensors misread, data spikes for reasons both technical and mundane. We have seen this before. Probes have fallen silent. Satellites have gone blind. Rovers have frozen mid-command. In the language of engineers, these things are unfortunate, but expected. Nothing more than the price of pushing fragile instruments into harsh environments. But the second story was darker. It claimed that what happened was not an error, but a discovery. That the terrifying surge of 3I divided by Atlas was not random noise, but a response. Not silence breaking, but silence answering. Between these two stories lies the tension that has defined our species for centuries. On one side, rationality, the insistence that everything can be explained, that science holds the keys, that fear is simply ignorance dressed in louder clothes. On the other side, imagination, the sense that some events are too strange, too perfectly timed, to be dismissed. Both sides, in their own way, are right. Both reveal the shape of who we are. Think about how information spreads today. A single rumor can circle the globe in hours, whispered in headlines, repeated in forums, magnified by social networks. When the word terrifying was first attached to the Atlas event, it was like a spark in dry grass. Scientists may have meant it in private, in cautious tones, but once released, it caught fire. Suddenly, everyone was asking, what could make experts usually so measured reach for a word so emotional? The rational camp insisted it was nothing more than a slip of language, stress, fatigue, the weight of years of work collapsing in a single moment. Of course, Someone would call it terrifying. But the imagination camp heard more. They heard confession. They heard truth leaking through the cracks of control. History is full of such divides. When strange lights appeared in the skies centuries ago, some called them comets, icy rocks burning through atmosphere. Others called them omens of war and famine. Both stories carried meaning, and both shaped how people responded. In the same way, the Atlas event has become more than a technical report. It has become a story with two competing hearts, and perhaps that is why it resonates. Because deep down, we know that truth often lives in the tension between extremes. Machines do fail, but sometimes failure is the first sign of discovery. Sometimes the glitch is not a mistake, it is a window. Picture again the control room on that night. Banks of screens glowing, engineers leaning forward, data streaming in steady rhythms. Then, suddenly, chaos. Graphs spike, alarms flicker, numbers twist into patterns that make no sense. Voices rise, confusion spreads, and amid it all someone whispers, "This is terrifying. Was it just stress? Or was it the sound of a curtain lifting on something larger?" The world outside that room will never know for sure. Reports will be redacted, data withheld, language softened. An anomaly, they will call it, unexpected but manageable. Yet the word terrifying cannot be erased. It has already escaped, already found a home in the public imagination. And maybe that is the most telling detail of all. Not the data, not the graphs, but the word. Because words shape worlds. When a scientist reaches for a word usually reserved for nightmares, it changes everything. It tells us that even the most rational minds are not immune to the weight of mystery. As you listen tonight, consider where you fall. Do you side with the rational camp, insisting that 3I divided by Atlas was only a machine stumbling in the dark? Or do you lean toward imagination, believing that Mars itself may have stirred, that something ancient and silent finally spoke? Either way, remember this, both camps are part of the same story. Rationality keeps us grounded, imagination keeps us reaching, and without both, we would never have built 3I divided by Atlas in the first place. The truth may never be clear, perhaps it was a glitch, perhaps it was more, but the fact that we are still speaking about it, still dividing into camps, still whispering the word terrifying, shows us something important. That the event was not just technical, it was emotional. It touched not only our machines, but our minds. And maybe that is what matters most. Not what happened near Mars, but how it made us feel. The unease, the wonder, the fear, the hope. These emotions are the true data of the Atlas event. Data that will echo long after graphs are forgotten. So, as you drift deeper into this story, remember, sometimes the divide between glitch and discovery is not clear. Sometimes the most terrifying thing is not the event itself, but the uncertainty it leaves behind. Close your eyes and step into a scene that no news report can capture. Imagine you are not on Earth, but orbiting Mars itself. You are a crew member aboard a vessel positioned just far enough to see the planet's vast deserts spread below like rusted skin, just close enough to feel the silence press against the windows of your ship. For weeks, you have watched the work of 3I divided by Atlas unfold. Data streams hum through your consoles, engineers smile at small triumphs, and the crew grows used to the rhythm of silence punctuated by steady signals. It is routine until the night everything changes. It begins subtly, a flicker in the instruments, a tone in your headset that doesn't belong. You glance at the numbers and see them spike first slowly, then violently. The graphs twist upward. Alarms pulse red. Voices crackle across the comms. Check power input. Confirm calibration. Reboot. But no reboot calms the storm. The surge builds, and the ship itself begins to tremble. You rush to the observation window. Outside, Mars glows as it always has. Calm, silent, indifferent. And yet, something feels different. The light seems sharper, the shadows deeper. A faint shimmer ripples across the thin edge of its atmosphere, like a silent scream too high for ears to hear. Someone shouts. Another alarm wails. And then, silence. Not the silence of calm, but the silence that follows an explosion you cannot yet see. Every console goes dark for a heartbeat. Every light blinks out. And in that moment, you feel the weight of space press against you, crushing in its stillness. Then, suddenly, the systems roar back to life. Data floods the screens again, but the numbers are wrong. Impossible patterns, surges in frequencies no one expected. It is as if the planet itself has pulsed, sending a wave through your instruments, through your ship, through you. Your chest tightens. You press a hand against the glass, staring down at the red world below. Did Mars just answer? Did 3I divided by Atlas knock on a door it was never meant to open? The captain's voice cuts through the static. Stabilize systems. Record everything. But the tremor in their voice betrays what everyone feels. Fear. Not panic. Not yet. But fear, heavy and sharp. Fear that you are not simply watching an experiment falter, you are witnessing a moment when the universe itself shifts. Outside, Mars remains silent. No storms rise, no mountains crumble, no great flare bursts into the sky. And yet, you cannot shake the sense that something has changed. The planet looks back at you, indifferent, yet aware, as if it has noticed the small machines that dared to touch its silence. Imagine being there, suspended between awe and terror, your body anchored by straps, your mind floating far beyond your control. Every second stretches into eternity as you wait for the next surge, the next pulse, the next proof that you are not imagining it. And when nothing comes, when silence settles again, it feels worse than noise, because silence can hide anything. Back on Earth, analysts will argue over data. They will debate glitches, conspiracies, signals. But you, standing at the window of a ship orbiting Mars, will remember it differently, not as numbers on a screen, but as a presence, a moment when the planet itself felt alive, a moment when you realized that humanity's ambition had crossed into territory it did not understand. Now, back in your seat, you try to calm your breathing. The comms buzz with orders, scientists rush to interpret, engineers curse under their breath. Yet beneath it all is the same unspoken thought. What if this is only the beginning? What if tonight's surge was not an accident, but an introduction? Let yourself sit with that thought. Imagine you are the astronaut, staring down at Mars, heart racing, hands trembling slightly as you log the event. Imagine what it feels like to be the first human to witness a planet stir not in myth, not in story, but in reality. Imagine knowing that your words, your report, will one day be read by billions, perhaps remembered for centuries. And as you drift back from that imagined window into your own room, into your own night, notice the feeling that lingers. The fear is still there. Yes, but so is something else. Awe. The kind of awe that only comes when you realize you are very small and the universe is very large, and sometimes it speaks in ways you cannot yet understand. The astronauts may never speak of it publicly. Their reports will be classified, their emotions tucked behind calm language. But for you, tonight, the scene is enough. The silence, the shimmer, the pulse it plays out in your imagination like a dream you cannot quite shake. And maybe that is the point. The story of 3I divided by Atlas is not only about machines and data, it is about moments like this, when fear and wonder collide, when silence feels alive, when Mars stops being a distant dot and becomes a presence that notices you back. Human beings love metaphors. When something is too big, too frightening, or too mysterious to describe, we reach for stories. And when the event of 3I divided by Atlas rattled our instruments near Mars, many found themselves reaching for one metaphor in particular, Pandora's box. You may remember the myth. Pandora was given a sealed container and told never to open it, but curiosity, so very human, so very irresistible, drove her to lift the lid. Out poured chaos, disease, and despair, flooding the world with suffering. Only one thing remained inside when she slammed it shut again: hope. Now pause and think about that story in the context of Mars. For centuries, the planet has been sealed in silence, a red box we could observe but never touch. With 3I divided by Atlas, we pried open the lid. We pressed our machines against the quiet and demanded that it speak. And when it did, when the data spiked and the instrument screamed, it felt, for some, like Pandora's box opening all over again. The metaphor is powerful because it touches something deep within us. Curiosity is our gift and our curse. It has led us to fire, to flight, to medicine, to art. But it has also led us to wars, to weapons, to disasters we never intended. Every discovery comes with a shadow. Every key unlocks not only doors but dangers. Think of the scientists watching the event unfold. They had built Atlas to listen, to measure, to explore. Their curiosity was noble, disciplined, wrapped in the language of science. And yet, when the surge came, when the word terrifying slipped out, what they felt was the ancient echo of Pandora lifting her lid. The realization that curiosity can be dangerous, that sometimes the answer is heavier than the question. This is not the first time humanity has faced such a moment. When we split the atom, we opened a box that glowed with both light and fire. When we mapped the genome, we opened a box filled with cures and ethical storms alike. And now, with 3I divided by Atlas, perhaps we have opened a cosmic box. A box filled not with disease or despair, but with the knowledge that the universe is not as silent as we imagined. The metaphor also carries another truth: hope. Remember, in the myth, not everything escaped. One fragile gift remained. Hope lingered in the bottom of the box, waiting for us to find it. And maybe that is the lesson buried inside the fear of Atlas. Maybe the terrifying surge was not just a warning, but a promise that even in the unknown, even in the danger, there is something worth holding on to. Ask yourself, what is more frightening? The thought that Mars is silent and empty forever, or the thought that it might not be? Both can chill the heart, one with loneliness, the other with risk. But both also carry hope. If Mars is empty, then perhaps Earth is unique, precious beyond measure. If Mars is not empty, then we are not alone, and the universe is richer than we dared dream. That is the strange balance of curiosity. It frightens us, but it also saves us. It unsettles, but it also inspires. And in that balance, we find ourselves again and again, standing before sealed boxes, trembling hands on the lid, knowing that once opened, nothing will ever be the same. So what did 3I divided by Atlas open? Was it chaos? Or was it wonder? Was it a flood of meaningless static? Or was it the first whisper of something vast? The truth may be both, because every box humanity opens contains more than one thing. It contains fear and fascination, dread and delight, silence and song. As you let this thought drift with you tonight, imagine yourself as Pandora, not as a figure of blame, but as a symbol of us all, standing at the edge of mystery, knowing the risk, feeling the fear, and opening the box anyway. Because that is who we are. We cannot resist the lid. We cannot resist the glow of a red planet in the sky. And so, the story of 3I divided by Atlas becomes another chapter in our long history of opening boxes. Some will call it reckless, some will call it courageous, but all will agree on one thing. Once the lid is lifted, There is no going back. Let's turn the telescope around. So far, we have stood on Earth, looking outward at Mars with questions heavy in our chests. But what if we reverse the perspective? What if, instead of staring at Mars, we imagine standing there on its barren surface, under its thin skies and looking back at Earth? Picture yourself on the edge of Valles Marineris, that canyon so deep it could swallow mountains whole. The air is thin, biting cold, and tinged with the faint metallic scent of dust. You pull your visor tight and lift your eyes toward the horizon. Far away, beyond the blur of atmosphere, a small blue star glimmers. That is Earth, our home. Everything we have ever known compressed into a glowing dot. From Mars, Earth looks fragile, not mighty, not sprawling, not the center of the universe, just a pale light suspended in darkness. You cannot see the borders we fight over. You cannot see the skyscrapers, the armies, the endless noise of human ambition. From here, Earth is silent, and that silence feels heavier than all the myths we once told about Mars. Now imagine being Mars itself, if such a thing were possible. For billions of years, it has spun quietly in orbit, indifferent to the rise and fall of life on its neighbor. It has watched Earth glow brighter with each passing age, watched lights bloom across continents, watched machines lift off the surface and scatter into the void. And then, one day, those machines arrive at its doorstep. Probes, rovers, satellites, and now, 3I, divided by Atlas. Instruments pressed against its silence, listening, demanding, asking questions Mars never offered to answer. From this reverse perspective, who is the intruder? Who is the restless one knocking on doors that were never theirs to open? Not Mars, not the universe, us, Earth, humanity. The blue dot glowing faintly in the distance, reaching too far, too fast. Standing on Mars, gazing back at Earth, you begin to see the irony. We think of ourselves as explorers, noble and brave. But to Mars, perhaps we look like something else. Children pressing against glass, hungry for secrets we do not yet understand. Or worse, trespassers scratching at locked doors, unaware of the dangers waiting behind them. And here is the haunting part. Earth does not look eternal from Mars. It looks small, delicate, and temporary. You realize that if Mars once had oceans and lost them, if Mars once had air and let it slip away, then Earth could too. The glowing blue dot is not permanent. It is vulnerable. The surge of 3I divided by Atlas takes on new meaning when you see it this way. Not just a glitch, not just a whisper, but a reminder. A reminder sent not to Mars, but from Mars reflected back at us like a mirror. The message is simple. You are fragile too. Consider what that means. If Mars could speak, maybe it wouldn't roar in anger. Maybe it wouldn't whisper secrets of life. Maybe it would simply point upward to Earth in the sky and say, "Be careful, you are not as safe as you think." This perspective changes everything. Instead of asking, "What did we awaken on Mars?" we begin to ask, "What did Mars awaken in us?" Awareness, humility, a sense of scale. It is easy to imagine ourselves as powerful when we stand on Earth, when we build machines like Atlas, when we speak of conquering space. But when we reverse the view, when we stand on Mars and look back, we see the truth. We are not conquerors. We are small, temporary, and vulnerable. And maybe that realization is more terrifying than any signal Atlas could detect. Take a moment tonight to picture Earth as a dot. Close your eyes and imagine it. The oceans, the forests, the cities, all collapsed into a faint glow. That dot holds everyone you love, every story you've heard, every dream you've carried. And yet from Mars, it looks like something that could vanish in an instant. Now open your eyes and realize that dot is you, that dot is us. And maybe the true gift of the Atlas event is not the fear it stirred, but the perspective it forced us to see. In the end, the universe may not need to frighten us with signals or warnings. Sometimes all it has to do is hold up a mirror, And when Mars does that, when we see ourselves reflected in its silence, the image is both beautiful and terrifying. Science and philosophy often seem like opposites. One counts numbers, measures forces, and demands evidence. The other lingers in questions, metaphors, and meaning. Yet when we speak of Mars and the 3I divided by Atlas event, the two blend together because the data alone cannot explain the weight of what happened. Numbers tell us how instruments spiked, but they cannot tell us why we feel unsettled. For that, we need philosophy. Let's begin with the science. Atlas was designed to measure the environment around Mars with precision magnetic fields, seismic tremors, the faint electrical whispers of cosmic particles. By itself, that is an extraordinary achievement. It means we can stand millions of kilometers away and still place our ears against the crust of another world. Every surge, every vibration is captured and translated into numbers. In the simplest sense, the event was a surge of readings that defied the models. But what does it mean when the models fail? Science tells us that failed models are not the end of knowledge, but the beginning of it. When the unexpected appears, discovery lurks nearby. Still, this rational comfort does not soothe the emotional tremor left in those who watched it unfold. For them, the event was not only data, but revelation. Here is where philosophy enters. It asks, why do we push so far? Why do we demand answers from worlds that never promise to give them? Are we explorers seeking liberation? Or are we intruders stumbling toward destruction? Consider liberation first. There is a noble view of science that sees it as the great light of humanity, lifting us from ignorance, freeing us from fear. To study Mars is to liberate ourselves from the prison of one world, to step into the cosmos as citizens of something greater. Every probe, every rover, every instrument like Atlas is a key in the lock of the universe, opening doors we once thought sealed. And in that view, even the terrifying surge of data is liberation. It is proof that there is still more to learn, more to see, more to become. Now consider the other side. Science is not neutral. It is a tool, and tools can wound. To probe Mars, to extract its secrets, to demand its silence break, this may not be liberation, but intrusion. History is full of explorers who claimed liberation but brought conquest instead, full of discoveries that promised light but cast long shadows. If Atlas disturbed something fragile, then the event is not proof of progress, but proof of arrogance. Both views carry weight, both reflect who we are, and perhaps the truth is not one or the other, but both. Science liberates us, yes. It frees us from superstition, gives us medicine, connects us across oceans, but it also carries destruction in its shadow bombs, poisons, scars on the earth. Philosophy reminds us that the line between these two is not drawn by the universe, but by us. Think again about that night in the control room. Engineers staring at screens, data climbing into the impossible. In one sense, they were witnesses to liberation the universe, revealing a new truth. In another sense, they were witnesses to destruction, the collapse of certainty, the opening of a door that may never close. Liberation and destruction, side by side, balanced on the same surge of numbers. Perhaps this is what makes the Atlas event so powerful as a story. It forces us to confront the paradox of our own existence. We are creatures who burn with curiosity, who yearn for freedom, who dream of spreading into the stars. But we are also creatures who repeat our mistakes, who overreach, who mistake conquest for discovery. Mars holds up a mirror to these truths. Its silence reflects our hunger. Its pulse reflects our fear. So which is it? Liberation or destruction? Exploration or intrusion? The truth may be that every great leap of humanity is both. Fire warms and burns. The atom heals and kills. Atlas liberates us with knowledge and terrifies us with consequence. The question is not whether it is one or the other. The question is whether we are wise enough to carry both without collapsing under the weight. As you let this thought sink in tonight, notice how it shifts the way you feel about the event. No longer just a glitch, no longer just a mystery, but a lesson. A reminder that science is never only about what we discover, it is also about how we choose to live with what we discover. Mars does not care whether we call it liberation or destruction. It spins silently, carrying its canyons and storms. The choice, as always, is ours. We have been walking through heavy ideas, fear, ambition, myth, and science colliding at the edge of Mars. But before we go further, let's pause. Take a breath with me. Let it fill your lungs slowly. Then let it out. Again. This story isn't meant to rush. It's meant to unfold, like the night sky itself. Vast, patient, endless. Now imagine yourself floating, weightless, not on Earth, not on Mars, but somewhere in between. No ground beneath you, no ceiling above. Just stars, scattered like ancient lanterns, and silence so deep it hums in your bones. You drift slowly, suspended in the void, as if the universe has let you go for a moment, letting you wander without gravity. From here, the Earth is behind you, glowing blue, fragile and small. Ahead of you, Mars glimmers red, steady and quiet. You are between them, between home and mystery, between certainty and the unknown. And in this weightless space, the fear you've carried begins to loosen. The silence around you isn't empty. It feels alive, like an ocean too wide to comprehend. Your heartbeat slows. The noise of daily life traffic, voices, deadlines, regrets, fades away. All that remains is breath, stars, and the faint glow of two worlds, one familiar and one strange. This pause is not a distraction from the story. It is part of it, because this is what space does to us. It strips away the clutter and leaves only questions. It reminds us that we are small, yes, but also part of something vast. And in that realization, fear transforms into wonder. Picture yourself turning gently, the stars shifting slowly around you. You raise a hand, and though there is nothing to touch, you feel the presence of everything. The solar wind brushing invisible fingers across your skin, the faint pull of Mars, as if it notices you drifting closer, the endless pull of Earth tugging at you with invisible threads of memory and belonging. Now imagine just for a moment that you are Atlas itself. Not human, not fragile, but an instrument of listening. You have no lungs, no heartbeat, only sensors tuned to silence. You drift near Mars, waiting. You are not afraid, because machines do not feel fear. And yet, when the surge comes, when the silence cracks, even you tremble, because even machines know when something is wrong. Let that image linger. You, both human and machine, suspended in space, caught between awe and dread. It is a reminder that sometimes the best way to understand a story is not through numbers or theories, but through stillness, through imagining yourself in the center of it, breathing in rhythm with the universe. Take another breath, deep, slow. Imagine the air carrying with it the weight of stars, the dust of planets, the memory of comets that have circled since before humanity was born. Exhale, and let the fear drift away. The story is heavy, yes, but you are not. You are weightless. The pause matters, because without it, we cannot carry what comes next. The story of Atlas is not just about science or myth. It is about feeling, and feeling requires space, silence, rest. So tonight, before we continue, let yourself drift a little longer. Float between Earth and Mars. Feel the balance of two worlds pulling gently at you. Notice how quiet it is, how calm, how vast. And when you are ready, we will step back into the drama, the data, the dread. But for now, just breathe, just float, just be. When the surge of 3I divided by Atlas was first recorded, it lived only on screens, cold numbers, jagged graphs, whispered conversations in control rooms. But data never stays locked away for long. Soon, The event spilled into the world beyond the labs, and with it came a storm of headlines, speculation, and fear. It began quietly. A single line in an internal report leaked online. Event classified as anomalous, potentially dangerous. That word dangerous was all it took. Within hours, forums lit up. Was Mars unstable? Did Atlas trigger something? Had we awakened forces better left alone? News outlets seized on the story. Some went cautious, reporting it as a mystery signal or unexpected readings. Others chose drama. Terrifying surge detected near Mars. The phrase spread like wildfire. Soon it was everywhere, from late-night talk shows to whispered conversations in cafes. The public did not need the graphs. They needed the word. Terrifying. Social media magnified it. One post claimed Atlas had detected artificial signals patterns too deliberate to be natural. Another insisted the event was proof of a secret weapons test. Memes appeared overnight, painting Mars with glowing red eyes, captions warning that the god of war had awoken. Truth blurred into rumor, rumor blurred into belief. Governments responded with silence, and silence always speaks louder than words. No press conference, no clear explanation, only phrases like "under investigation" and "an isolated anomaly." And for the public, that silence confirmed suspicion. If there was nothing to hide, why hide at all? Even scientists disagreed. Some went on record saying it was nothing more than a technical glitch, a burst of interference. But their calm words were drowned out by others who admitted, off the record, that the data did not behave like any interference they had seen before. Fear spread because fear had room to grow, and beyond fear, fascination bloomed. Artists painted visions of Mars cracking open to reveal glowing cores. Writers spun tales of ancient civilizations stirring beneath the dust. Filmmakers rushed to draft scripts. For once, science had handed culture, not just facts, but mystery and culture, devoured it. Ordinary people felt it too. Parents looked up at the night sky with their children and wondered aloud if Mars was safe. Teachers faced questions in classrooms they could not answer. Farmers, workers, students all glanced at the red dot above and felt a shiver. It was no longer distant. It was personal, because here is the truth. When the unknown enters society, it does not stay scientific. It becomes social. It becomes emotional. And the Atlas event was no exception. It did not only shake instruments near Mars, it shook trust, belief, imagination. It reminded people that the universe is still capable of surprising us, and not all surprises are gentle. Imagine scrolling through your phone late at night, stumbling on headline after headline about a terrifying surge near Mars. You know you should sleep, but curiosity pulls you deeper. You watch shaky videos of supposed leaked signals. You read threads that insist governments are hiding the truth. By the time you put the phone down, Mars no longer feels like a distant neighbor. It feels like a door, half open, with shadows behind it. For those who lived through earlier space events, Sputnik, Apollo, the Challenger disaster, the ATLAS surge became another defining moment, a memory etched into the timeline of space exploration. Not for triumph, but for unease. For younger generations, it was the first time they realized space could be frightening, not just fascinating. And still, amid the noise, one question pulsed through society. What if? What if it was not a glitch? What if it was not an error? What if Mars had answered? No one had proof, no one had certainty. But proof was not what mattered. What mattered was the story, and the story had escaped the labs, taken root in the minds of millions, and grown into something larger than science could control. The event of 3I divided by Atlas became not just a technical anomaly, but a cultural earthquake. And as with all earthquakes, the aftershocks would continue to ripple for years. History has a way of repeating itself. The event of 3I divided by Atlas may feel new, modern, unprecedented, but the emotions it stirred are ancient. fear at the edge of discovery, dread wrapped in wonder. We have walked this path before, again and again. Think back to the middle of the 20th century. In the deserts of New Mexico, a small group of scientists gathered to watch the first atomic test. They knew what was supposed to happen. They had equations, predictions, confidence, and yet, when the flash lit the sky brighter than the sun, many of them felt not triumph, but terror. Robert Oppenheimer whispered words from the Bhagavad Gita, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." Discovery had brought not only knowledge, but dread. Decades later, another kind of silence broke. Chernobyl. What was meant to be a showcase of nuclear power collapsed into chaos. The readings on Geiger counters soared. Incomprehensible, terrifying. Ordinary people could not see the radiation, but they felt the fear. Invisible forces had been unleashed, and the trust in progress cracked. Even further back, sailors once told of compasses that spun wildly in storms, of strange lights dancing on masts, of skies that burned red before disaster. They too felt the unsettling truth that when we step into the unknown sometimes steps back. And so it is with Mars. The surge of 3I divided by Atlas is not just data. It is part of this long tradition of moments when humanity realized it may have gone too far, too fast. Each time, the pattern is the same. First, excitement, then anomaly, then fear, and finally, a question that lingers. What have we done? Perhaps the most haunting parallel comes from the myth of Prometheus. He stole fire from the gods, gifting it to humanity. For that, he was punished, chained to a rock, his liver devoured daily by an eagle. Fire was progress, but it was also pain. Mars, glowing red in the sky, now feels like another fire we have stolen. Atlas may be our modern Prometheus, daring to take what was not freely given, and in return, leaving us to wonder what punishment will follow. History also shows us the duality of fear. Each terrifying moment has also led to growth. Nuclear tests, as dreadful as they were, eventually gave birth to treaties, to safety protocols, to medical advances. Disasters like Chernobyl forced transparency, caution, humility. The fear became a teacher. The dread became a guide. So perhaps the Atlas event, terrifying as it felt, will also become a teacher. Maybe it will remind us that the universe is not ours to command, but ours to learn from. Maybe it will force us to step carefully, to listen more humbly, to recognize that discovery is never without cost. Picture a timeline stretched across history, each point marked by light and shadow: the first fire, the first atom split, the first rocket launched, the first rover touching Martian soil. And now, another mark glows red, the surge of 3I divided by Atlas. We do not yet know what it means, but it belongs on the same line, a moment when humanity felt the weight of its own ambition pressing down. And here is the deeper truth. Fear is not new, but it is necessary. Without it, we would charge blindly into the dark, careless and unprepared. Fear slows us, humbles us, reminds us that we are small. It does not silence curiosity, but it balances it. It is the shadow that keeps the fire from consuming everything. As you listen tonight, remember that the story of Atlas is not only about Mars, it is about us, about our habit of repeating the same dance with discovery. We reach, we tremble, we learn, we reach again, and though each step feels terrifying, each step also carries us forward. Every great scientific project has two stories. The first is the one written in press releases, noble, clean, inspiring. The second is the one whispered in corridors, debated in secure rooms, filed away in classified reports. The event of 3I divided by Atlas is no different. Officially, it was built to listen. Unofficially, some believe it was built to test. From the beginning, there were murmurs. Why pour billions into a machine that merely listens. Why position it near Mars, where communication delays stretch minutes and control is fragile? Some said the answer was simple: science. Others weren't convinced. They suspected another layer, a hidden motive, that Atlas was not just an observatory, but a weapon, or at least the first sketch of one. Consider what such a weapon might mean: a device capable of manipulating magnetic fields, probing seismic structures, perhaps even triggering subtle shifts in planetary crusts. In the right hands, knowledge becomes power. To map a planet is to prepare it. To study its weaknesses is to know how to use them. If Atlas could listen deeply enough, could it also disturb deeply enough? Could it push, not just record? These are dangerous questions. And when the surge came, when the word terrifying slipped into the conversation, conspiracy bloomed. Some claimed Atlas had accidentally tested a hidden function, that the surge was not Mars speaking, but Atlas itself pushing too hard, too deep. Others argued the opposite, that Atlas had intercepted something it was never meant to hear, a signal not of earthly origin. Either way, the suggestion was the same. The public story was incomplete. Governments offered silence, and silence, as always, fueled suspicion. Why no transparent data dump? Why no live press conference? Instead, documents vanished into classified archives. Reports appeared scrubbed. Language was softened: anomaly, unexpected fluctuation, environmental interference. Words designed to calm, not to clarify. Yet behind closed doors, even scientists began to wonder. If Atlas was truly innocent, why had so many precautions been taken? Why were military observers present during launches? Why were certain frequencies monitored not only by universities, but by defense networks? Here lies the unsettling possibility. Maybe Atlas was both things: a scientific marvel and a strategic asset, a machine that could enlighten, but also intimidate. History tells us this is not unusual. The rocket that carried men to the moon began as a missile. The atom that heals in hospitals also destroyed cities. Science and power have always shared the same laboratories. So when Atlas surged, perhaps the fear was not only cosmic, perhaps it was political. A realization that if the machine could be bent toward control, then the surge was a glimpse of what it might unleash if misused. Terrifying not because of Mars, but because of us. But there is another angle, one less cynical, and perhaps even more haunting. What if Atlas truly was only science, only curiosity, only the pure desire to listen and still? The surge came. Then the fear is not of hidden motives, but of the truth itself, that the universe is stranger than we imagined, that no conspiracy is needed because reality itself is terrifying enough. Either way, the shadow of secrecy lingers. People wonder what is being hidden. Was Atlas too powerful, too revealing? Was the surge an accident of design or an act of discovery? And most troubling, will we ever know? For you listening tonight, it may not matter whether Atlas was weapon or wonder. What matters is the feeling it leaves. The suspicion that behind the story we are told lies another, darker version. The sense that every triumph of science carries within it the seed of control. And the fear that, once again, we may have built something we cannot fully trust. As Mars spins silently in the dark, we are left to spin stories here on Earth, some of hope, some of fear, some of conspiracy, all circling around the same unanswered question: what was Atlas truly built to do? Speculation thrives where certainty fails. Since the Night 3 divided by Atlas surged, theories have multiplied like stars. Scientists, philosophers, journalists, and ordinary people have all asked the same question in different ways. What exactly happened near Mars? The first possibility is the most cautious: a geological event, Mars is not as lifeless as it looks. Beneath its crust, tremors ripple, quakes shake its canyons, subtle but measurable. Perhaps Atlas detected one of these Marsquakes, amplified by a chain reaction deep underground. If that is the case, then the surge was natural, a pulse from the planet's hidden heart. Terrifying, yes, but no more so than the Earth's own earthquakes. Yet there are problems with this explanation. The readings did not match known Marsquake patterns. The signals were sharper, more sudden, more violent. They carried frequencies that looked less like tremors and more like deliberate bursts. Scientists hesitated. If it was a quake, it was unlike any they had ever seen. The second possibility stretches outward. Cosmic interference. Space is full of radiation. Storms of particles hurled by the sun. Waves of energy born in distant galaxies. Perhaps Atlas caught one of these storms, its instruments overwhelmed by a cosmic gust of wind. That would explain the sudden spike, the terror of watching numbers climb into the impossible. But again, doubts linger. The surge was too focused, too localized. Cosmic radiation usually spreads broadly, washing over everything. This felt different, like a spotlight rather than a floodlight, something directed, not dispersed. And then there is the third possibility, the one whispered in corners, the one some refuse to write down. Something alien, not life, necessarily not green figures or ships in the night sky, but something other, a signal not born of geology or radiation, but of intention, a pattern that suggested will. Even the most cautious scientists admit the data had a strange rhythm, pulses that looked like sequences, bursts that hinted at order. Was it language, music, static? No one can say. But the idea is enough to unsettle even the calmest mind. Because if it was intention, then Atlas was not listening to silence. It was eavesdropping on a voice. Of course, skeptics dismiss this quickly. They argue that humans see patterns everywhere, even in noise. We find faces in clouds, meaning in static, messages in shadows. Perhaps the data was nothing more than chaos, dressed in the shape of order by our desperate imagination. Perhaps. And yet, the word terrifying does not belong to chaos. It belongs to recognition, to the moment when something familiar is seen in the unfamiliar, to the shiver of realizing that what you are hearing is not random, that it might be alive. Imagine sitting in that control room. The graphs climb, the alarms cry. You stare at the patterns, and for one instant, just one, you think you recognize them. Not fully, not clearly, but enough to whisper, "This means something." In that instant, the universe feels closer, sharper, more dangerous than ever before. If it was geology, we must ask, what power lies sleeping beneath Mars? If it was cosmic, we must ask, what storm could focus so precisely on one machine? If it was alien, we must ask, who or what is listening back? Perhaps the truth is a mixture, a quake amplified by resonance, a cosmic gust magnified by Mars's thin air, or maybe something entirely new, a category we do not yet have words for. After all, every discovery begins as an impossibility. For you, listening in the quiet of your own room, the details may matter less than the feeling. The sense that the universe is larger than our categories, stranger than our models, more alive than our arrogance allows. Whether quake, storm, or signal, the surge of Atlas carries the same lesson. We do not yet know. And perhaps that is why it feels terrifying. Not because it proves something alien, but because it proves our ignorance. It shows us that even with billions invested, even with the most advanced instruments, we are still children pressing ears against doors we cannot see through. Whenever something stirs near Mars, the next question always points back home. Could it affect Earth? The night 3, I divided by Atlas surged. That question rippled through command centers, newsrooms, and living rooms alike. Because Mars may be millions of kilometers away, but in the scale of the cosmos, that distance is barely a breath. Start with the physical. If the surge was geological, some massive quake or subterranean release, then Earth is safe. Mars can tremble, mountains can collapse, Dust can rise, and the effects stay there. But if the surge was not geological, if it was energetic, then the story changes. Energy does not respect distance. Solar storms born on the sun sweep across the solar system, knocking out satellites and disrupting power grids here on Earth. Gamma-ray bursts from distant galaxies travel billions of light-years, their signals still reaching us. If Atlas detected a surge of radiation, a burst of waves, or something stranger, it is not impossible that the same ripple brushed against Earth, unnoticed, unmeasured, unprepared for. Imagine for a moment that Atlas wasn't the only one to feel it, that our own atmosphere trembled, that our satellites flickered, but we dismissed it as noise. The thought chills because it suggests the event is already part of us, already echoing in our machines, our grids, our skies. Then comes the psychological. Even if Earth is safe from radiation or quakes, it is not safe from fear. The word terrifying did not stay in labs. It spread across societies. Fear has consequences, markets shake, trust erodes, priorities shift. Already, whispers about redirecting budgets, accelerating defenses, preparing for cosmic threats have begun. A surge near Mars may not melt ice caps or topple cities, but it may reshape politics, economies, and imaginations. And what of the deeper consequences? The ones harder to measure. If Atlas heard something intentional, even faintly, then humanity has crossed a line. We are no longer alone in our own minds. We may still be physically isolated, but psychologically, we are connected to something larger. That alone changes everything. Think about how small events have shifted us before. A single photograph of Earth from Apollo 8, just a blue marble rising over lunar dust, sparked an environmental movement, changing how we saw ourselves. A single signal, the WOW signal detected in 1977, still lingers in imaginations, a mystery unresolved. The Atlas surge may be another of these moments, magnified 1,000 times, a reminder that the universe does not exist for our comfort. Could Earth be directly threatened? Some argue yes. If the surge was a release of radiation, then maybe our shields, magnetosphere, atmosphere protected us this time. But what about next time? What if the pulse grows stronger or repeats? What if it wasn't random at all, but a test? Others dismiss this as paranoia. They argue Earth is too far, too shielded, too small to matter. Mars can groan, the sun can flare, the cosmos can hum, and still Earth spins, unbothered. But even they cannot dismiss the unease entirely, because history shows us that complacency is the greatest risk. Picture yourself walking at night. You hear a sound in the distance, a low hum, strange, unsettling. It doesn't touch you directly, it doesn't harm you, but it changes the way you walk. You quicken your pace, glance over your shoulder, wonder if it will come closer. That is what the Atlas surge is to Earth. Not an immediate wound, but a shadow that shifts how we move forward. And maybe that is the most profound consequence. Not destruction, not disaster, but perspective. A reminder that Earth is not untouchable, that the line between us and the cosmos is thinner than we imagine, that we are part of a system that can tremble without warning. As you listen tonight, ask yourself, what matters more, the actual surge or the way it makes us feel? Fear can ripple farther than energy, wonder can ripple farther still. And perhaps Earth is already changed, not by radiation, not by quakes, but by the simple knowledge that something happened near Mars that we cannot yet explain. The effects are here already, in our headlines, in our conversations, in the way you glance at the night sky and feel a shiver of unease. That is the ripple reaching Earth. And that ripple may be just the beginning. Word count, 1,108. Zung. There is a dangerous illusion that humanity often carries the belief that we are in control. We build machines, launch rockets, map galaxies, and convince ourselves that the universe will behave the way we expect. The event of 3I divided by Atlas near Mars shattered that illusion. It reminded us, brutally and suddenly, that we are not masters of the cosmos. We are guests. Think of the language we use: conquer space, colonize Mars, dominate the frontier. These are words of ownership, of arrogance. But what right do we have to claim such things? The cosmos is not ours to own. It is vast, ancient, and indifferent. Our ambitions are flickers against its eternity. And yet, again and again, we speak as if planets are stepping stones, as if silence is waiting to be broken by our instruments, as if the universe exists only for our discovery. 3I divided by Atlas was born of that mindset, a machine designed to press our ears against Mars and demand answers. We assumed the planet would whisper gently, that data would flow neatly into graphs, that mystery would yield on schedule. But instead, Mars roared, or at least, it surged. And in that surge was a reminder: we do not command, we ask. And sometimes, the answer comes in ways that terrify us. This arrogance is not new. History is filled with it. Empires once believed the oceans existed only for them to sail. Colonizers thought distant lands were theirs to tame. Scientists split the atom and believed they could control its fire. Each time, the universe or history proved otherwise. Each time, hubris brought both discovery and disaster. Now, with Mars, the pattern repeats. We built Atlas believing that we could listen safely, that knowledge would flow without consequence. But knowledge is never free. Curiosity is never without risk. And arrogance blinds us to the cost until it is too late. Imagine for a moment that the surge was not random. Imagine that Mars, in its silence, has always held power we did not understand. Imagine that our instruments, arrogant in their probing, touched something fragile, something ancient, and it responded. The thought chills because it forces us to confront our smallness. We are not gods. We are not rulers of space. We are children knocking at locked doors. And yet, arrogance has a strange twin: courage. Without the arrogance to believe we could cross oceans, humanity would never have mapped the Earth. Without the arrogance to believe we could fly, the sky would still be closed to us. Without the arrogance to believe we could reach Mars, Atlas would not exist. The same impulse that blinds us also carries us forward. So where is the line? When does courage become hubris? When does ambition become arrogance? Perhaps the Atlas event is that line, drawn faintly in Martian dust, a reminder that exploration requires humility, that the universe is not an open book, but a living force that must be respected. Take a moment to let that settle. We are small. We are temporary. Our control is an illusion. But that does not make us weak. It makes us aware. It makes us capable of awe, of wonder, of reverence. If arrogance blinds us, humility can open our eyes wider than ever before. Maybe the terror of Atlas is not punishment, but perspective, a cosmic reminder to slow down, to listen carefully, to remember that the universe is not ours to command, that every planet, every star, every silence we disturb is not just an object of study, but a presence, a story older than we can imagine. As you drift deeper into this thought tonight, let go of the illusion of control. Breathe in the humility of smallness. Breathe out the arrogance of ownership. Feel the truth of it. We are not rulers of the cosmos. We are wanderers in its vast halls. And the surge of Atlas was the sound of those halls reminding us of where we stand. Loneliness is a feeling we usually associate with empty rooms, with silence after laughter, with the absence of a hand where one used to be. But in the vastness of the cosmos, loneliness takes on an entirely different shape. It is not just the absence of company. It is the crushing realization of how small we are, how rare we might be, how silent the universe has remained, despite our endless questions. The event of 3I divided by Atlas only deepened that loneliness. Because when the surge came, when the instruments screamed and then fell still, what did it truly reveal? Was it a signal, a voice from beyond, proof that we are not alone, Or was it a reminder that even when we listen as hard as we can, the universe answers in riddles? Imagine drifting above Mars on that night. Below you, deserts stretch into endless horizons. Above you, stars burn cold and eternal. Around you, silence presses like a weight. For a brief moment, Atlas seemed to shatter that silence. A pulse, a tremor, a possibility. And then, nothing. The silence closed again, heavier than before, as if mocking us for thinking it would ever break. That is the loneliness. Not just silence, but silence after hope. The pause that follows a door creaking open, only to slam shut again. The echo of a voice you thought you heard, but can never prove. The knowledge that you may never know if you are truly alone, and that the not knowing itself may last forever. Scientists live with this loneliness every day. They send signals into the void, listening for echoes, and hear only static. They point telescopes at stars, searching for worlds like ours, and find barren rocks. They build machines like Atlas, desperate to capture a whisper of connection, and instead receive noise that terrifies rather than comforts. Curiosity drives them, but loneliness haunts them. And yet, loneliness is not without beauty. It is what makes Earth glow brighter in our hearts. It is what makes every life, every voice, every laugh so precious. If we are alone, then we are extraordinary. If we are rare, then our existence is sacred. Perhaps this is why the Atlas surge unsettles us so deeply, because it dangled the possibility of connection and then left us stranded again. Was it a message? Was it an accident? Or was it nothing at all, just another reminder that the universe owes us no answers? Take a moment to feel that loneliness, not as despair, but as perspective. Look around your room. Every object, every sound, every breath belongs to a fragile world, floating through an indifferent void. And yet, in that fragility, there is intimacy. The cosmos may not speak back, but Earth does. We do. You do. Now imagine the silence from another angle. Imagine that Mars is not empty, but listening too. That somewhere beneath its dust, in ways we cannot yet comprehend, something waits. And if that is true, then loneliness may not be eternal. It may simply be a pause, a breath before a conversation begins. Loneliness, after all, is only half the story. The other half is longing, and longing is powerful. It drives us to build machines like Atlas. It drives us to tell stories, to dream, to listen harder, even when the silence feels endless. Loneliness may hurt, but longing keeps us moving. So perhaps the surge of Atlas was not a punishment, not a mistake, but a reminder of that longing, a spark to keep us listening, a nudge from the cosmos that says, "You are not finished yet." As you drift deeper tonight, let that thought soften the edges of fear. Yes, the universe is vast. Yes, it is silent. Yes, we are small. But within that smallness, we carry a longing bigger than any planet. And maybe, just maybe, that longing will one day be answered. Word count 1106. Zung. Stories are not just told, they are shared. And tonight, the story of three, I divided by Atlas, is not mine alone, nor the scientists, nor the historians. It is also yours, because the mystery of Mars is not a distant problem locked in laboratories. It is something we all carry, each in our own way. So let me ask you, how does this make you feel? When you hear that a machine near Mars surged in terror, do you feel fear or wonder? Do you shrug, convinced it was just a glitch? Or do you feel a shiver when you look up at the night sky? Do you want to know more? Or do you prefer the comfort of not knowing? Maybe you are listening from a quiet bedroom, phone in your hand, the light of the screen glowing softly against the dark. Maybe you are listening in your car, Headlights cutting through empty roads. Maybe you are halfway across the world, under a sky where Mars burns low, red and steady. Wherever you are, this story is now part of your night. And that matters, because stories like this survive only when they are shared. The scientists can argue in journals, governments can classify their files, skeptics can dismiss the anomalies, but if you feel something, if you carry the unease or the curiosity, then the story lives on. You become part of the ripple that stretches outward, just like the surge itself. So here is my invitation. Leave your mark. Write a comment. Whisper your thoughts. Tell someone tomorrow what you heard tonight. Not because it solves the mystery, but because it keeps the mystery alive. Every voice added to this conversation is another light in the darkness, another signal sent across the void. Imagine if thousands of people, scattered across Earth, each looked up at Mars tonight and wondered the same thing. Imagine the quiet network that would create not of wires or satellites, but of hearts and minds tuned to the same question. That is the real power of stories. They connect us. They turn loneliness into community. They remind us that even if Mars is silent, we are not. Perhaps you have your own theories. Perhaps you believe it was a glitch, nothing more. Perhaps you suspect it was a signal, faint but deliberate. Perhaps you wonder if it was something entirely different, something no one has words for yet. Whatever you believe, it belongs to this story now. Because the truth is, stories are not about answers. They are about participation, about drawing you in, letting you feel, letting you add your breath to the chorus of wonder. 3. I divided by Atlas. T-A-T-L-ACE. May be a machine, but the real experiment is us. How we respond, how we imagine, how we carry the weight of not knowing. So tonight, let yourself lean into that role, not as a passive listener, but as a participant, as someone who carries this question into tomorrow, as someone who might even inspire others to ask it too, because the mystery is not finished, the surge is not explained, and the silence of Mars is not final. And if you feel comfortable, I invite you quietly, gently to share. Tell me where you are listening from. Tell me whether the red glow of Mars frightens you or fascinates you. Tell me whether you believe the universe is silent or full of hidden voices. These small gestures matter. They are the threads that weave individuals into community. As Atlas reached out into the dark, so do we. As Atlas listened, so do we. And just as Atlas was forever changed by what it heard, so are we, tonight, by what we have shared. By now, we have circled around the event of 3I divided by Atlas, from every angle: myth and science, fear and wonder, loneliness and ambition. And yet, the heart of the mystery remains. The truth is that no one knows exactly what happened near Mars that night. The surge remains unexplained, the data unresolved, the questions unanswered. And maybe that is how it must be, because sometimes the meaning of a story is not in the answer, but in the asking. The value of Atlas is not only in the numbers it recorded, but in the way those numbers shook us, forced us to wonder, invited us to imagine. We may crave certainty, but the universe often gives us mystery instead. Think of how many times humanity has stood at the edge of the unknown, sailors staring at horizons they could not see beyond, scientists peering into microscopes and finding invisible worlds teeming with life, astronomers glimpsing galaxies that stretched farther than their minds could hold. Each time, the answers came slowly, but the questions came first. And in those questions, we grew. So perhaps the surge of Atlas is not an accident, nor a threat, nor even a discovery. Perhaps it is simply a reminder that we are still small, still learning, still humble before the cosmos, that no matter how advanced our instruments, there will always be mysteries that slip through their nets, that no matter how confident we are, the universe can still surprise us. Imagine Mars tonight, silent and red, its deserts stretching endlessly under a thin sky. It does not care about our fears or our theories. It spins as it always has, ancient and indifferent. And yet, in its silence, it has reminded us of something important, that wonder is not dead, that even in an age of data and precision, the universe can still leave us speechless. Maybe that is why the word terrifying spread so quickly. Not because of danger, but because of awe. Because in the face of the unknown, terror and wonder are often the same thing, two sides of the same coin. We tremble not only because we are afraid, but because we are overwhelmed by the immensity of what we cannot yet understand. And so, the conclusion is not a conclusion at all. The surge of Atlas remains what it always was, a mystery, a door half open, a question hanging in the night sky. Perhaps one day we will know more. Perhaps one day the data will make sense, the patterns will resolve, the fear will fade, or perhaps not. Perhaps this will remain one of those unsolved moments, a story we tell not because it is finished, but because it never will be. As you lie there tonight, drifting towards sleep, let that mystery rest with you. Do not demand answers. Do not rush to explanations. Let the silence be enough. Let the unknown be a companion, not a threat. Because sometimes the most beautiful thing is not knowing. Sometimes the most powerful story is the one that remains unfinished. Mars glows red in the sky. Atlas listens still, and somewhere between fear and wonder, humanity waits. And so we arrive at the end of tonight's journey. From Earth to Mars, from myth to machine, from silence to surge. We have traced fear, awe, suspicion, and hope, only to find ourselves back where we began, under the same sky, staring at the same red glow, holding the same unanswered question. What did 3I divided by Atlas truly uncover near Mars? Was it a glitch, a quake, a cosmic storm, or a signal? We may never know. And perhaps that is the gift, because sometimes the unknown does not weaken us, it strengthens us. It reminds us that we are still explorers, still dreamers, still capable of wonder. As you rest tonight, let yourself hold on to that wonder. Let it soften the edges of fear. Let it remind you that even in the quiet of your own room, you are part of something vast, something alive, something still unfolding. The surge of Atlas is not just a scientific anomaly, it is a story, and now it belongs to you too. And if this story has carried you gently towards sleep, or left you with a spark of curiosity to carry into tomorrow, I ask you to join me in keeping it alive. Leave a comment. Share where in the world you are listening from. Tell me if Mars fills you with dread, or fascination, or both. These small gestures ripple outward, turning one story into many, one voice into a chorus. And if you want to keep traveling with me into history, into myth, into the strange corners of the cosmos, consider subscribing. Each night, we open another door together. Each night, we step a little further into the unknown, because this is not the end. The Atlas surge is only the beginning of a larger conversation. If Mars can shake us with mystery, then what happens when we find more than mystery? What happens when we find life? That is where we will go next. To the question that lingers louder than all the others. What if humanity truly discovered life on Mars? What would it look like? How would we respond? Would it unite us or divide us, terrify us or inspire us? For now, let the thought rest with you as you drift into sleep. Mars glows steady above, a reminder of silence and of questions yet to come. And somewhere out there, Atlas still listens, still waits, still trembles with secrets we cannot yet hold. Close your eyes, breathe deeply, let the mystery cradle you like the night itself. Sweet dreams, fellow traveler. We will continue the journey together soon.